This is Maharajas of Scale, a podcast where we go behind the scenes and talk to founders who are demolishing the myths around building and scaling a big business in India. These are the stories that have shattered the assumptions around Indian consumers and are changing the game completely. I am Krishna serial entrepreneur, co-founder of Flit, the fashion locator in town, and startup mentor, bringing you these stories. Hey everyone, this is your host Krishna from Maharajas of Scale. We have a young and dynamic speaker today, someone that's bringing, a degree of simplicity to the complexity of managing a home that we all have. We have amongst us today Gautam, the founder of OpenApp. It is an interesting time to be speaking with Gautam because we've heard of hockey stick growths, and Gautam is actually living through one right now, and he'll share more about that in this episode. Gautam, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Krishna, for having me. I think, it's a pleasure speaking with you. One quick clarification, I'm Gotama.
All right, I'll address you as Gotama.
All right, thanks, Krishna. And again, thank you very much for having me. I look forward to this.
Awesome. So, Gotama, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're working on right now.
So, I am your Sida Sada boy next door, right? I'm a Bangalore boy born and brought up here. And I have what someone would say a very different approach to this whole startup journey than most people, because my educational background is in journalism, psychology and lit from Christ University.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and I'm running an IOT startup, not even internet, IOT, right? Like that's at another level altogether.
Right.
So that's my educational background, most unlikely place to be in right now. I think we can speak more about it later, but right now we are at an interesting point where, thanks to COVID, right, there are two industries that we are fully aware have, started growing like crazy. That's EdTech and HealthTech.
Right.
But us being in IoT, we realized very early, I think in April itself, that automation is now going to see a spike that it has never seen before. Like everybody's been talking about IoT for the past maybe a decade or so, but this is what the industry needed of COVID, to really let people know that automation can do wonders for them. It could be a consumer or an enterprise, right? So the hockey stick growth that you're talking about, we only see now because people have always known the power of IoT and automation, but now they feel the need for it. They're right now at a point in their life where it makes a difference.
Right.
So yeah, that's why I think the next decade and more after that is going to just be IoT.
It's interesting you say that. Let's dig that a little deep. Personally, I have seen IoT as obviously the Internet of Things means, from a printer to an alarm clock to the ubiquitous Amazon Echo or the Google Home devices that we hear about, and also smart lights. These are all connected. What exactly is COVID changing that, this has become in some sense a inflection point or a watershed moment for IoT?
First, let me give you a perspective on how it's changed things for us in the smart lock industry, and then I will dwell into what exactly it means for IoT, right? So for smart locks in the enterprise space especially, so we have a bunch of smart locks for enterprises and consumers separately, but the one that's seeing a spike right now is what is called as a GPS enabled smart lock. So it's it's hardcore IoT embedded, which means you can open this lock. It's a wireless product, so you can open this lock from anywhere in the world. It has a form factor of a padlock, so which means it's truly mobile. What this product simply meant was enterprises today, especially in trucking and warehouses, need not have to use physical keys at all. We've always been in this business, and what used to take us, let's say, 3 to 4 months to close a largish deal has now dropped to 15 days, and our inbounds have increased by almost 15x, simply because now everybody sees the need to automate, and everybody understands that contactless is here to stay, and they also find this a reason to now move on, right? As I was saying, we've always known that IoT is important, or automation is going to save so much of your time and also money in the long run, etc., better for the world, environment, so on. But what COVID has done has accelerated that, right? So it's given that little nudge that it required, and it's pushed it off the cliff.
Interesting.
So now that's I think why it's amazing, and that's how it has been for smart locks. IoT in general, as I said, the same rules apply. Smart locks especially are a very, very niche category. People have been looking for such solutions, didn't find any. Now they started looking harder, so hence our inbounds have been shooting off the roof. But IoT also, apart from just smart locks, is doing really well. I can say that because we're building a platform that works with multiple hardware devices, and we interact with some really good IoT companies out there, and we've been seeing this surge there as well.
So we'll get into the scale aspect and the quantitative and qualitative aspect of it in a few minutes, but at a high level, touch upon what sort of numbers you were seeing before and how has it accelerated. What sort of scale are you at right now?
So let's say in enterprise used to contribute to our overall revenue, and logistics especially in that would contribute to, let's say, 45%. Now it's gone up to 80%. Right? And B2C, so we have both enterprise and consumer business. In the consumer business, we're growing 60% month on month.
Okay. I saw some chart from a friend of mine who covers startups, which showed that you were at close to 200,000 locations, and in COVID, you shot up to 1 million locations. Is that true?
I think this would have been slightly older number.
Okay.
This was... So that happened for us last year. We hit 1 million plus, and that I think 1 million is accesses. And this, if you've seen this as a graph, but in terms of locations, we've crossed 500,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is a big number.
It's a very, very big number. I think we are only one of those companies in the country today to have that kind of data.
So let's understand something. What is it? IoT was one of those things which was hot at some time ago. And everybody talked about scale, but very few achieved it. So what did you do differently?
See, IoT was hot and continues to be. Just didn't see that I think it didn't have that moment that e-commerce had, or it hasn't yet had that moment that we are now seeing EdTech have, right? But that is exactly what I'm saying. Everything is about timing, and I think we're hitting that timing right now. COVID is going to really take us there. But apart from that, if I just have to go back a little bit and talk about what we did differently to get here, honestly, a bunch of things. But more importantly, it was just the grit to get something done. Right? Do whatever it takes to be successful. Because I can tell you, in my personal experience, I've come across a lot of entrepreneurs in the IoT space who've tried to build something around hardware, but couldn't succeed, not because there weren't enough avenues. They just didn't want to travel as much, right? Let me give you a classic example. I remember sometime in 2015, when just before we started OpenApp, I went to this startup conference, and then there was this guy who was presenting a smart lock at that time. And he had raised like 20-30 lakhs or something like that, and then on stage, and he was demonstrating it. And these were really, really early days, right? Globally, not even in India.
Right.
In the world at that point of time, there were only two successful companies out there. One was Lockitron, and the other one was August. Lockitron was a Kickstarter-based company. They raised good money on Kickstarter, but then couldn't really take off. That was simply because they couldn't get their supply chain right. The product was always great. However, August did both of them really well and got acquired by Assa Abloy for about 400-500 million. And Assa Abloy is the world's largest lock company with a total global market share of 10% plus. Right? All of this still happened in 16 and 17. But this company that I'm mentioning that I saw in Bangalore, right? I met the same founder about a year later, and he'd already given up. And this was the guy I had seen on stage and sort of thought, okay, this will be a nice place for me to sort of get to in about a year. And I meet him in another conference in a year later and see that he'd given up. He'd just moved on to doing something in software. Because you go around, you talk to a lot of people, you speak to VCs, and the first thing they tell you is hardware is not scalable, right? And they're not willing to write a check. And then you're looking at a Sachin Bansal at that time. You're looking at Ritesh was still very young, but you had multiple examples. Paytm was really spiking,
right?
Or millions of dollars in the system, and then nobody is ready to write a check for 100K.
Right.
Was a very, very demotivating phase, and I'm sure a lot of people have just given up because of that. But what we did differently, very, very differently, was we didn't even look at the VC ecosystem to begin with. When we started off, we were product and client centric. We first got a client, then built a product. First got a client, convinced them we could build a product, took a check as advance, took that money, built the product and team, and built it to scale. And when we couldn't scale, I took a hand loan for 42% per annum, which is 3.5% per month for a decent size, right? For like 100k, for 60 lakhs at that, less than 100k, but about 60 lakhs I took as a hand loan to fund working capital at 42% per annum. And then we raised VC money, right? So we've kind of gone the other way around. We didn't build something because we wanted to get funded, or we didn't build something because we thought that it was cool at that time. That I think is a huge differentiator, and which is why we continue to go, because we can see, a few years ahead of us than most people because of our experience right now. And that is turning out to be extremely valuable, especially with the kind of inbounds that we have from strategic players, incumbents, even VCs that want to start talking to us now.
Very interesting. You covered a very vast arc of a story there in about 2 minutes. But let's step back a bit. Journalism to entrepreneurship. What is the story behind that story?
See, I actually did my electronics in 12th. I did PCME.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
That's the only academic connection I have to electronics. I mean, it ended there when I was 15, 16 years old. Right? After that, I got into journalism simply because the fact that I did not believe that education itself, a certain kind of education itself, meant success. Right? I would attribute that to my family. So I come also there. I have a slightly unique background. My father is a national award-winning filmmaker, and he's produced and directed the largest number of documentaries for the state and central government. In fact, one of the largest in the country today, 400 plus. So I've seen, and he was a farmer, by the way. So he was someone who migrated from a village near Hassan to Bangalore, worked with some of the tier 1 directors and filmmakers out there in the country, and then became one and successful himself. So I've seen him go through that journey. And when I had to make that decision after 2nd PUC or 12th, I looked at him and I thought, he was my first inspiration, right? Like for most kids, your dads or your fathers are your first inspiration. And I just saw that being unique or being able to take the less traveled path can lead to success. That was sufficient. And there was this funny thing that I heard, which also motivated me not to do my engineering, right? So in Bangalore at that point, there was a very, very popular saying that said, if you take a stone and throw it in Bangalore, you'll hit one of 3 things. 1, dog. 2nd, building. 3rd, engineer. Which means there were so many of them, right? So I just knew that it was not the path for me, and I decided to take up journalism, psychology and lit instead. Simply because I believed it was a very, very strong combination, and it had what it could provide what I would need to sort of equip myself with in the real world. I saw myself getting out of that and jumping into one war zone. And I thought, okay, what would I need to survive? I thought these 3 things were far more valuable. So which is sort of where and how my educational background that's how it turned up.
Okay. And then?
So in terms of what happened and how we ended up with OpenApp.
Yeah, one is education. So obviously education is one thing, but from that education, what did you do next?
So then let me just take you through my story completely. So immediately, I've always been entrepreneurial. So in my final year of college, I started saving up some cash because I knew that I wanted to do something by myself. And I started saving up cash by I started doing these odd jobs. I actually started off distributing pamphlets and doing odd jobs for these large MNCs like Kingfisher, TVS and all these, right? So I used to get paid by the hour. That's how I started off. My dad still doesn't know about it, but that's how I actually started off. And then I got an opportunity to do some basic real estate. And at the age of 20, I used to go to college with property papers worth a few crores in my bag. And the way I would manage my time to show these properties, and these were also not 1 BHK, 2 BHKs. I would actually go show plots or acres of land to potential buyers, right? And I had a few deals and also lost a bunch of them because I was a kid. And I was not doing this for a living. I was doing this because I needed to save up and I wanted to do something on my own. I saved up a little bit of money, got done with college, and immediately started in an industry that most people And by the way, this I've spoken to enough people right now, and most people, F&B is the most overrated industry in the world, right? Because eating is something that is natural to us, and going out and eating in a restaurant is so natural to us, we believe that it is an easy business. And most people you see out there aspire to have their own restaurant, their own cafe, their own hookah bar, right? A bunch of these things, because we see consumption and automatically relate it to demand. So it was very similar in my case, but as I said again, my journey has always been about being a little hatke, offbeat. I chose a category, so I started a QSR joint. QSRs are quick service restaurants.
Right.
So I started a concept called Tosh. This was, for anybody who knows Bangalore, around Ragigudda, the temple in Jayanagar. So this was a building right opposite the temple. Chose a spot, paid the rent, set everything else up. I didn't know jack shit about making, like cooking. Like even now, the only thing that I can make is Maggi. But I hired a consultant who was at that point of time the pan-India chief for F&B for Barista Lavazza. I somehow got connected to him, got him on board as a consultant, got him to help me make the recipes at that point. And just before I opened, and when I say that, I mean like a week before opening night, I had to sort of take the decision and shut it down. And that was my first ever failure, ever, right? And the reason I shut it down is very interesting, is because the local corporator at that point, I was obviously a week away from opening. The one thing that I didn't have was my F&B license, right?
Why?
Everything else was there, everything else was ready. And then I went to the local, BBMP office and tried to catch hold of the officer, and then came to know that I have approval because it was a pure vegetarian joint. Like I'd figured out, like it was a different type of bun. There's a lot of creativity that went into it. In fact, Good Bread, GBL, Good Bread Limited, used to make breads for KFC and McDonald's at that point in time. So that was the quality, and GBL was the one who were supplying breads for me, right? On top of all of that, to that level of quality, and I had not received it, and then realized that the corporator expected a bribe, simply. And I was young, again, I was 21. I didn't know what to do. I went back in for the first time, and I think the last time went to my dad for my help, right? I went to him and I told him all of this, and because he's also slightly well connected, he's from Bangalore, etc. He was able to get somebody so he was able to get the local MLA to call the corporator. Now the corporator took it to heart and he put it on the temple trustees, and he said they have a problem. Now this has just blown out to be a small restaurant that a kid is trying to start, to now being a religion/temple trust issue types.
Okay.
The MLA just said, look, this is obviously serious if what he's saying is true. So you just go back, get an NOC from the temple trustees, and we're good to go. I'll ensure that your son can open his joint no matter what.
Right.
And we found out there was no problem at all. The trustees didn't give a damn about one small joint opening in front of their gate, right? But my dad told me one thing. He said, look, now you have two options. Option number one, he obviously expects a bribe. You just go ahead, pay that bribe and continue. Option number two, you tell me you don't want to pay the bribe. We will obviously get that NOC, go back and get you your license. But 6 months down the line, 8 months down the line, this guy is going to come back and try to say no parking or you're littering or whatnot. He's just going to cause more trouble.
Right.
So you have two options, choose one. I actually picked the third. I shut it down. And looking back at it, it was the most foolish thing to do. Like if I had to take a decision probably now, I don't think I would do that. I would just pay him. As a businessman now with enough experience, I would probably pay him and continue. But I didn't do that, right? It was raw passion. I somehow didn't see myself entering a phase of life that I was going to live through for this lifetime, right? One is education, then you move on to business or working or whatever. I didn't go get a job. I decided to do something on my own. And this was going to define the rest of my life. I somehow, in a very filmy style, didn't see myself taking that path, doing something that I didn't believe in, and I decided to shut it down. And this experience I will never forget, because for the next 3 days and 3 nights straight, I had extremely high fever. I couldn't eat, I could not sleep, I couldn't even drink water. And it had nothing to do with a virus or bacteria, nothing. It was just out of pressure. It was just out of anxiety, right? I'd saved up money, I'd put it into this business, I was ambitious. You obviously have stars in your eyes, and all of a sudden, all of that is gone. Boom.
Right.
In like that instant, and that happened, and I shut it down anyway. And that's when your relatives start coming in and start telling you that, okay, why do you want to do this? Get a job or join your dad and a bunch of things. But interestingly, what happened is that turned out to be my biggest lesson in failure, and I try to implement that wherever possible in life. From here, I moved on to different levels of success. I started my brand. Again, I continued to be in F&B, but I started a brand called Cupcakery, which was also my first exit. Yeah.
So what was the insight that you implemented eventually in everything that you did from that experience?
Perfect. So with Tosh, right, I took 6 months from that point of failure to starting Cupcakery, and in that meantime, I made a list of all the things that went wrong and could also go wrong if I had to remain in the industry. The first thing that I realized that was a problem was having a physical store in the first place, right? Like, even if I moved the store away from JP Nagar, if I had to put it up in, let's say, HSR layout, it's the same system. I cannot get away from it. One, the store remains the same, which means a physical place will also mean you have to do things for people to walk in. You can't go to the crowd, no matter how much effort you've put in, no matter how much money you've flowed in already. And again, with regard to branding, you are sort of, again, stuck to the place because you belong to that physical store, right? I took that insight and went ahead and again, in terms of making things, I also realized that it was not scalable. Once I shut it down, I realized that it was not as scalable as I thought it could be, because I had the experience of setting up one space, and I saw that if I had to convert that to 100, the amount of effort and capex it would take was going to be humongous. Like, there was no way I could exceed a threshold of certain units per day without setting up another store. It was literally impossible. Like, you can make, let's say, just call it a burger, right? Let's say if you could sell 100 burgers a day and that was your threshold, for you to start making the next 100, you have to set up another new store.
Right.
Especially in QSR, there is a certain amount of demand only that you can sort of cater to. I took these insights. I used the same consultant that was working with me, Barista Lavaza, who introduced me to my first mentor in my professional journey, which is Mr. C. Ramachandran, who's the head of family Nilgiris. Nilgiris 1905, which got bought out by Kishore Piani 3 years ago. So Nilgiris is a 100-plus-year-old company. We all know that it's a humongous success. So I got introduced to Mr. C. Ramachandran, so at that point in time, 60% of Nilgiris was already owned by Actis, the private equity fund. So because this man was such a passionate guy, he had his own factory, proprietary, somewhere near Bomhalli, right? Only for baking cakes and sort of still continuing confectionery items, etc. I met him. I decided to use his space. So basically, I used to pay him per third-party contract manufacturing. Simple.
Right.
I went and implemented contract manufacturing for cakes.
Okay.
Right. So I went to him. I said, okay, you manufacture this, and on the back end, I tied up with AB Mori and Pillsbury. Again, MNCs who also made premixes. The consultant that I had hired from Barista Lavaza, he made a very specific recipe that went into those premixes that were made for us, like it was custom made. And then it was all produced in that factory, right? And now that is about production. Where did I sell eventually? I did not pick up a store because that was obviously one of the things I learned. I instead picked up at that point, Vespa had recently launched, Piaggio, right? I bought a Vespa, a red color Vespa, caught hold of a design graduate from NIFT, got him to design a box that looked like a cupcake, took that Vespa out in front of a college and saw whether it will sell. Simple. I made 30 cupcakes, got them made in fact, went in front of Jain College Jayanagar during the break and saw if it would sell. It sold. It got sold down in no time. That was it. That was proof of concept, right? And when you don't have to even call people to sort of address and tell them to buy, and then they start buying, you know this is scalable. I took that concept, bought another Vespa, scaled it up, did really well, then realized that there is more demand that I can cater to. Instead of scaling the Vespa itself, I realized my target audiences are in schools and colleges. I started tying up with canteen owners and people who already have space there to keep my stock. And by the end of it, I had presence in more than like maybe 30 plus different point of sales in India, including Gopalan cinemas and Inox cinemas, right? And we were in all tier 1 schools and colleges of the city. And I eventually, about a year and a half into it, I figured that this is not something that I want to scale because I didn't see myself going from, on a good day, we would sell 700 cakes, right? A day, a single day. I didn't see myself taking that to maybe 70,000 or 7 lakhs because I realized very quickly that it was going to be operationally intensive, and a brand even built with that much, sweat and blood into it was not going to give those disproportional returns the way an entrepreneur would want to look at it, right? I didn't see myself becoming a millionaire through that or a billionaire.
So you saw that it could become a good small business, but not a startup.
Yeah, it could not be like, I could not be on Maharajas' scale. Let's just say that, right? It could not be scalable.
Right.
Like it would never be as scalable as what I wanted to see myself as how I saw myself as.
Sure.
So yeah. So that was my first success, and I sold it. I sold Cupcakery to Mr. C. Ramachandran for a small royalty-based deal. So I made money for the next 1 year out of that business. And how that was useful to them was because I had tied up with A.B. Maury Pillsbury, created that little bit of IP, which also meant that there was standardization, which meant the first cake that came out of the oven was the same as the 500. And the consistency and quality with regard to the flavor was because of my tie-ups. And the pricing, because of all of that, was extremely affordable. Even till date, so our cakes were anywhere between 20 to 25 rupees. The base was 55 grams and the cream was 25, which means that a package of 75 grams for less than 25 rupees is still something that you will not get anywhere in this country of that quality.
Right.
Like even now. So that was valuable. So I sold it. Nilgiris then decided to create a muffin line out of that, and not Nilgiris, I mean CR's, which was completely owned by the family. That was a brand that they 100% owned. Decided to use that, and so I made some money after that for the next 1 year. And which is when, while I was looking for opportunities, I sort of stumbled upon IoT as an industry. This was way back in 2014 when a friend of mine who had done mechatronics introduced me to the concept and sort of made me imagine this magical world where you could press a button here and things will happen there. And of course, smartphones were still sort of becoming a thing at that point, and everybody knew that it was going to scale. And there was one statistic that stuck to me, right? Very simply, it simply said that by 2018 or 19, the total number of devices in the world, smart devices in the world, will cross the human population, right? Will cross the total number of humans. And that statistics was, that was something that was flabbergasting. And I figured that if something was growing so quickly, right, obviously opportunity was there around it. And then started looking around what is a niche that can be catered to, that is a very common need, that sort of can address the need of a guy living in a hut to maybe is there a consumer behavior that kind of sticks with anybody living in either a hut to let's say even Bill Gates, right? Is there something that we're doing that can be better through IoT? And that's how we sort of stuck to smart locks, and the journey began. A journey began from there. That's a whole new segment of how we scaled OpenApp. But this was the journey through which I arrived at OpenApp.
Very interesting. So from a food and beverage segment and creating something hatke or out of the ordinary, and you jump into IoT, it sort of feels like the stories that you hear about. I don't know if it's true or not, but you do hear that story a lot where Jeff Bezos looked at the percentage by which internet was growing, and then he decided that he was going to jump in and then do something in the internet space. So it feels somewhat like that. Very interesting.
I don't think Jeff Bezos still made cake.
Yeah, it's a unique story, right? But hey, cupcakes, who doesn't love them? They are fantastic. But you're right about the food aspect though. I don't know if it's demand aspect whereby you look at people eating out and say, okay, I could do a restaurant. There is something about it. It is perhaps the most number one startup idea or a business idea that anybody has. And the funny thing is that also is universal across borders. I've seen While in Europe, in UK, a bunch of friends that I used to have, if they had some downtimes, or when around the weekend you get together to share a drink or two, they would say, I'm going to quit all the stuff I'm going through right now and then start a restaurant. And you would hear something similar from the friends in US and in India. So much so that it's part of popular media, right? If you remember, I don't know if you watched the show, the show How I Met Your Mother. In that, they are talking about both of them building a bar, and where the bar is going to be called, I think, Last Call, where there was never going to be a last call, right? So,
nice. Yeah, it is. I think it's very subconscious, and as you very rightly said, it has nothing. It's not Indian at all. It's a very human thing. Maybe it'll be interesting to probably dig deeper offline and understand where that comes from. But yeah, it's a great business, but I think it's also the toughest. That's what I meant when I started off with it. I think it's a wonderful business, but it's also not as easy as it looks on the outside. It's super operationally intensive. Like, you have to get a lot of things right to really make money from it.
That is correct. But I think there are certain repeatable formulas. If people who've lived in Bangalore realize that, or they can see hotels everywhere, the so-called Udupi ramen, the quick service South Indian restaurants, they're there everywhere. If you follow that format, it is a format that serves multiple palates and tastes. And I think there is a formula there, right? So if you peel that thing a little bit, the Udupi hotels where they serve the usual South Indian fare, almost all of them thrive, right? They're doing business from morning till night. As long as you know how to manage that labor and create a certain formula. I know for a fact that if there is an Udupi hotel that is shut down, something has not been managed well. Because the founder of the Udupi Krishna Bhavan is a friend of mine. And I know what sort of success he has seen. So that's interesting. And so their formula is different. People have to maintain that consistency, that service, that pricing. And if you draw a parallel in the grocery business, there is a group of people. I think they can be loosely called the Kerala Muslims. They have a way with that grocery business. In the last 15 years, and India has seen a lot of ups and downs in the last 15 years. And when I see people, the grocery business is another one, right? A lot of people say, yeah, I could start a grocery store anytime. It is a daily need and I could make money of it. But if you fundamentally compare what the Kerala Muslims do, largely, I think it's some sort of like all other business groups out of India. I think they intuitively, as part of their DNA, have some formula. I've seen that all parts of Bangalore, other more retail and then smart retail, all sorts of groceries open and shut down. But these guys don't shut down. Not just that, they are profitable. They make money hand over fist. They've figured out a formula. Their product mix is so very, very vast, even in those smaller places. So big market, families, you'll see a variety of those chains. So ultimately, you're right. It's about figuring out. There is a formula. Every one of them has a formula. As long as you unearth that and then stick to that, it is easy. Well, not easy. It is possible to create a profitable business.
Definitely, and you're right about these groups. So, I have made the same observation. And with the Kerala Muslims, now I wouldn't say groceries. I would say department stores.
Right.
They own a bunch of almost. I don't have a number, so I cannot put a percentage to it. But almost every successful departmental store that you walk into is owned by somebody who is either from Kerala or is a Kerala Muslim, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And it's to how you look at Gujus doing a certain type of business, or closer home, Iyengar bakeries in Bangalore are from either Mangalore or Hassan. So yeah.
That is correct. There's definitely a formula that all of them are aware of. Yeah, and which is why the fundamental difference is from groceries, it becomes departmental store. So the premises the funny thing is the square footage, the premises, those don't change. But the formula is tweaked a little bit and then these guys go to succeed. So that's interesting. So let's jump into the IoT journey. So the numbers fascinated you. IoT, mostly we have seen these are maybe OEM manufactured from China and then slapped with the local software. Even that is not very widely done. It takes a certain skill set. like you said, VCs definitely have a way of saying, okay, hardware is not scalable, but it has its nuances. Again, it's about knowing what to do there. What was that journey like? How did you decide? And that was not an easy journey to start, given India is not very widely known for hardware. The ecosystem is so sparse.
Yes, absolutely not. In fact, see, I've had more rejections than normal entrepreneurs. I think I can proudly say that, and not rejections because, like, the minute I've said that, people assume it's from VCs. It's not actually the VCs. We didn't, as I said earlier in my conversation, we didn't start with the VCs, right? I've had more number of people telling me, like a couple of examples. The CEO, I won't take names of these companies and people, but the CEO and MD of one of the largest manufacturing companies based out of Karnataka, backed by a PE firm, etc. Once I went all the way up to his place that's outside of Bangalore, took an appointment, waited for like a month to take that appointment, went and met him and showed him the first prototype that I got made. And he just told me that it's going to be a showpiece. You're building something that people wouldn't want. Right up to the CTO of one of India's largest telecom companies, because of my background, and also he didn't think smart locks made sense in enterprises, said that I shouldn't be attending technical meetings if I didn't have the necessary background or the product to suit that conversation, right? So it's been harsh that way, but it's only motivated me and the team more. So when we started off, again, no VC funding, I very clearly knew that was not going to work. There was no point also. We started off customer first. Initially, the dream was to build a B2C brand out of India, meaning build a smart lock for homes. That's how we wanted to start off. But also realized at that point, the market was not ready. India was not yet a consumer IoT market. It had shown no signs of it, and there was no reason for us to believe it either. Of course, we looked into some data and realized that if we build something now, we'll have to wait for 5 years to be able to succeed. We instead found an opportunity, I would say, when me and another friend of mine, we were sort of hanging out near MG Road. I saw this guy walking around with a huge stack of keys, right? And he was really grumbling. He was on the phone and he was handling this box, this junction box. The ones that I'm sure you'd have seen on the streets of Bangalore, right? That belong to telecom companies. So he was one of the repair guys. He was one of the ops guys. He was walking around with a huge stack of keys and he was fumbling with it on call. I just couldn't see this fellow. I went to him and I knew it was something to do with locks and keys. I wanted to know if there was a problem statement. Went to him, asked him what he was up to, and then realized that he was from this company called ACT FiberNet, right? And he started telling me about how they continue to lose batteries in these. So I'll tell you how this works. So for a company like ACT to provide you a service, they have a junction box stationed for every 8 customers, right?
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah. If you're a customer of ACT, you will know for sure because they've had so many issues with it. So fundamentally, there are 2 things in that box that are of value. One is the internet switch. The second is the battery. The internet switch is not valuable to you as a common man. It's a valuable asset for the company. But the battery is valuable for the common man, right? Now the problem started with basic key management. Meaning all these were junction boxes, had normal lock and keys, and those were handled by their own ground staff that earned anywhere between 7 to 8K a month. Very simple story. Now these guys had keys, which means he almost felt entitled to opening it whenever he wanted. He or she had basically that group of people made a business out of stealing batteries and selling them in black markets. What obviously that meant was not just loss of capital because they had to continuously refurbish these batteries. It was your alternative source of powering up the internet switch, but it also meant that their attrition levels started rising. It became such a serious problem. Like you said, you know of these junction boxes, right? You probably know of it because ACT has the most popular reasoning when your internet goes down. They tell there's a problem with the box. And previously they would still say that, okay, there is a problem with the battery in the box. At least that's the problem we've solved now. So we realized, okay, this is a problem, and this was a very, very big problem for them. They tried multiple solutions, tried China, tried India, tried giving it to these large MNCs as a project to sort of cover. Nobody had been able to even take it up or solve this for them. Now I went in and as again as a young guy who's really ambitious to have that opportunity to build something, I went and told them I can do it. I heard them out. As also primarily a sales guy, I figured out how to get to the right person, etc., etc. Got to somebody technical, and then got him to introduce me to somebody in ops and a VP of ops, and sat down and had a conversation, understood their problem statement, told them that I can build this for you. Now, mind you, I'm this one guy. I don't, obviously non-technical. I just thought, okay, problem statement, big enough for them to sort of pay me to get it done. Let's try this out. Took me 3 months to convince them that we could build a smart lock to solve this problem. And I also got them to write a check for me, a 50% advance. A 50% advance was our first check. And I got a 500 unit order. The first order that I got was for 500 units with 50% of that PO amount in advance. Now I have the check, I deposited. I don't have the team to build this, neither do I obviously also don't have the product, right? And the validity of the PO was 3 months. And during this time is when I got people on board, tried a bunch of things, failed miserably. So the PO also expired, by the way. So I had to go back, renegotiate, get a new PO issued, and took an additional 3 months. And in that 3 months, I found a team from IIT Kharagpur, also my co-founder Siddesh, right, and his friends from IIT Kharagpur to come down. They had decided. I had met my co-founder on Facebook at that point. When I say at that point, for almost a year before that, he was always enthusiastic about IoT, and we'd met on a platform on Facebook, and we had built a rapport. And I convinced him and his team of 3 more guys, a total of 4 people, to shift to Bangalore to come and build this with me. And they did. They shifted. They came in, and literally, I think 2 days or 1 day before the second PO expired is when we went and sort of gave them those 500 locks. And to make that happen, we sat down and hand soldered all those 500 locks ourselves. Like, we started like that, 2 days and 2 nights straight. We hand soldered it. Of course, there was a lot of other background work that had already been done. Like, we had our molds in place. We had a vendor in Pune finalized for all of that raw material, obviously in place. We only assembled the last 2 days. But we found our solenoid vendor from Pune. We got the guy who manufactured the plastic casing in Bangalore. A bunch of electronics we got from Delhi. So we sorted out the supply chain, made 500 locks with our own hands, and delivered it to the client. Yeah. So, and the rest, I think, is just history, because from there was no stopping us. For that single client, we have delivered more than 40,000 units. And we deployed it across all major cities in the country. We serviced their requirements in all those cities. And it's only after we, got on that journey we even raised VC money, right? And I also, as I explained, when we started going through this, when we really started surging, is when I also, instead of looking for VC money, I knew this can be built out by ourselves. I took a hand loan at that point, and these, so you always have these angels, right? I won't call them, they're not angel investors, I mean angels. A lot of people around you as an entrepreneur, if you're growing, you need these angels around you that will do things that are out of the norm. Like these 2 people that there were 2 people that lent me the money. They were who were proper financiers, like they financed people for a living, right? They looked at me and gave me 30 lakhs each without a collateral, non-collateral. Like, if something had gone wrong, technically they could hold me for it, but apart from that, their money was gone, doom. That's it. There was nothing that I could provide as collateral. They gave that money because they saw this order, they saw this enthusiasm, they saw the product was real. They just said, take it. And of course, we obviously gave it back with interest. But I would say there are people like that, or otherwise in other startup founder journeys, you'll find those angels can be family members or just friends who've been able to go out of their way to help. So that really, really worked.
So the ACT order was, in some sense, the thing that kickstarted the whole thing for you, this whole journey.
Absolutely. That was truly sort of what put us out there. And to tell you, just from that scale and the revenue that we generated, For that time, we had the largest order for IIoT in the country, or probably even most parts of the world, as a startup, right? I'm not comparing ourselves to the large MNCs. So, and even those 40,000 plus units, we started, after, of course, making it with our own hands, we set up our own assembly line. We got that manufactured in front of our own eyes. We had a contract with a guy to manage the labor. So, which means we had 25 people coming in and literally assembling stuff every single day. And that's how we've built this company from the ground up. And if you see, it's very rarely that you find another startup that has been able to do this, especially in hardware. And then we raised money, and then we moved our manufacturing out of India to larger contract manufacturers. Now that we had scale, we had money. We were also aiming for larger industries, etc. We started standardizing a bunch of things after that.
So you manufacture them in India, or where is the manufacturing?
For the last 2.5 years, the manufacturing used to happen in China and Taiwan. But now again, with whatever is happening, the geopolitical situation and also COVID, etc., we have already started moving that back to India. So a couple of our products we are going to move that manufacturing back to India soon. We've already begun that process.
Interesting. Is it easy to do that?
See, the fundamental reason why we moved out of India was because it is truly hard to manufacture in India, right? And see, all these examples that I gave you, the story sounds all great now, but I know the kind of sweat and blood that has gone into it, and literally, like I can give you examples of when when my co-founder had to carry a bag filled with solenoids, right? So, 1,000 plus solenoids, like in a gunny bag, and travel from Pune to Bangalore on a bus, obviously, right? Which means put it on the bus, move it from place A to place B, put it on the bus, come here, and then move it to our office. And so it's really, or even right now, like when I have to go do some pitches, I carry these huge chunks, these locks, and go around, show people. So it's really not been easy at all in terms of getting the manufacturing done here in India. The journey was not that great, but now we have to do it, and I think it's getting better. Also, there's more scope, and we've also evolved as an organization. We'll work with EMSs here that can provide us the kind of quality and scale that we want.
Right. And what about, it is one thing to move manufacturing back here, but a totally different thing to be able to continue to innovate. Do you see the Indian ecosystem rising up to that, or do you think as a necessity it will happen eventually?
Sorry, I didn't exactly get your question.
See, the initial industry in China was all born out of copying the West.
Right.
And designs would go, for instance, today if you pick up an Apple device, it will say designed in California, assembled in China.
Right.
But that is a thing which is a rarity. A lot of design happens in China, experimentation happens in China. There is a lot of supply chain in China. So for a product that you possibly already perfected, and in the IoT world and in the device world, nothing stays constant. Maybe you need updates every 3 months, 6 months, or maybe a year. So it is one thing to move manufacturing, but also to be able to replicate that innovation ecosystem around you. So the question is, do you think you will still continue to be able to get that kind of support even for all of your new product releases once you move manufacturing here?
I believe I look at IoT as two primary things. Of course, one is hardware and the second one is software, right? There is a certain level of innovation that you can attain when it comes to hardware, because you have, apart from just innovating on concepts, you also have constraints around what is a commodity and what is not. Like, for example, today the cost of my Bluetooth chip is X. 2 years ago, it was drastically different. And if I had to give you a consumer example that is easier to understand, like your smart bulbs 3 years ago would cost you 2,500 to 3K. The same smart bulbs today cost you $500. And the reason for that is not because, somebody innovated on something and then was able to bring the price down. It was simply because of the components that are being used are now being manufactured in bulk, and hence the prices drop to a level where it can become a commodity. That is how hardware overall as an industry works globally, right? Except for super niche things like in IIoT, like if you're going deep tech, etc. where the price of the device itself does not make a huge difference. They use the device to do other things, right? So the way I look at this entire space panning out, especially in India and through India, is the software side of IoT, right? Because hardware, we will continue to innovate. We will also work with manufacturers, but hardware will always be commoditized sooner or later. But now we have continued to sort of innovate on the firmware and software aspect, and we are building out an integrated platform that can do more. So we're building AI capabilities on top of IoT products, and we see that going hand in hand. And we believe we are right now at a point in the journey where we are no more a smart lock company. We are building a full stack IoT company. Smart lock was a way to enter the market. We've gotten here, and we've also achieved the status of being number one in the country right now. And of course, it's a huge opportunity. If we just had to build this out, we can build this into a company that can be a few hundred crores in revenue in the next couple of years. But apart from that, we see a much larger opportunity around being full stack and with global scale,
right?
Which can achieve truly global scale. So I wouldn't say manufacturing is the only thing that you need to look at if you have to look at innovation in IoT.
Yeah, got it. Interesting. So it still plays toward what India's strengths are, and you're saying that is only going to get more and more interesting.
Correct. See, because if for anything else to happen, it's not in my hands, nor in one single entrepreneur's hands. The entire ecosystem has to evolve. That's why I gave that example of the Bluetooth chip, the cost of a Bluetooth chip coming down, etc. Right? So, which means that if manufacturing in India had to become simpler, it has nothing to do with me. It has to do with how quickly the entire system evolves. Now, how quick everybody in the system, including the government, realizes that there is a great opportunity right now with a giant like China losing ground, and India has that beautiful opportunity to pick up from China, from where China has left. If you look at it historically, it's something that China did while looking at Japan, right? Around the 60s. Japan was the China of its time, where it was not known for manufacturing great quality stuff. It was actually known for making cheap quality stuff. Then they sort of evolved and became something else later. China, in fact, just replicated the same model. If we could learn from that and look at this as an opportunity, then I think you will see some great entrepreneurs building great companies around hardware and IoT. Because the talent is definitely there. Intent, ecosystem, yeah.
Oh yeah, our I think greatest strength is our talent. There is no doubt about it.
Yeah.
The brains of our people, our resilience, and the system itself makes it so hard for you to do basic things, which is why Indians are so resilient. It has got, and for some reason we create chaos, we embrace chaos and thrive in chaos. And it is evident from, cluttered homes to cluttered, company org charts to the way in which we communicate. But somewhere, I think a different formula has to be found because it is just like COVID was the moment for IoT. COVID could also be a moment for the Indian economy. But that potential has always been there. The talent has always been there. I don't think that has ever changed. For some strange reason, we've embraced an absolutely wrong set of policies for a very, very long time. And I don't blame this is not a political platform or anything of that sort, but I don't blame the politicians, any of them, because they come from us, right? So
correct.
They have to succeed by keeping us happy. And I remember one headline 3 years ago, post demonetization, and there was a worldwide slump, there's some sort of a recessionary tendency, and Flipkart and the likes had withdrawn their offers that they had made to a lot of students in their final years, campus recs, right?
Right, yeah.
And what really starkly stood out was IIT grads who had received offer letters and then which Flipkart could not actually support because their business situation had changed. A bunch of parents of these IIT grads and the IIT grads themselves had gone out and then met the government, saying that the government should intervene. I mean, when I read that, it disappointed me so much. if the cream of the Indian ecosystem, or so-called cream of the Indian ecosystem, wants government intervention and protection, God knows why why these people are even subsidized for that education, right? And India has a lot of security. We have parents, we have their own homes. If we fail to, let's say, not find a job for 5 years after graduating, our parents or some relative will take us in and gladly feed us, right? We could possibly not say that for extremely poor people, but millions of Indians at least have that opportunity. But yet, in spite of having that social net, our innovation is so broken, our motivation is so broken. So if we are the people, we are the ones that push those policies, right? We should stop saying, I don't want to put up with shoddy service, I don't want to put up with shoddy products, and I'm going to embrace excellence. Yeah, I'm reminded of a piece of correspondence, actually a series of letters outside of Bangalore on the way to Nandi Hills. You have this town Mudenalli.
Yes.
And so it houses Sir M. Vishweshwaraya's home, and which has today been converted into a museum. In the ground floor, there are a series of artifacts, so the knighthood and all of those things that were given to him.
Right.
What is interesting are a series of correspondences between Sir MV and Mahatma Gandhi, and this dates back to the mid 1920s. And the Vishweshwaraya is so vehement about embracing industrialization, while Gandhi is just going the other extreme. And today, in today's light, if you actually look at Gandhi's views versus Vishweshwaraya's views, it is so easy to see why a wrong set of ideas triumphed, and we are stuck in, Gandhi is a great man, he did a lot of great things, but unfortunately, we've adopted a very, very absolutely below average economic model that is not doing justice. If kingdom after kingdom, from Vijayanagara to the Gupta kingdom and to some of the great Mughal kingdoms as well, the religious aspect putting them aside, they all thrived because of the amount of trade that they did, the products that they created, the plurality that they embraced, and the support they gave for business. Somewhere along the way, we've only snatched a narrow set of ideas from that part of history, and we've thrown away everything that was useful in some sense, only hung on to dogmatic ideas. I don't know, in my opinion.
I agree with everything that you're saying. In fact, I think we could talk about politics. As you know, my journey sort of started from that in a way, touched by politics. But you're right. See, but I honestly think, Krishna, that now's the time where India is seeing that shift that we've all been waiting for. See, with Gen Y and Gen Z, and I don't know what other terminologies out there to call out young people, but you will see that with whatever is happening in India right now, in terms of mobile penetration, tier 2, tier 3, and now we are looking at 5G entering our markets next year, and prices further dropping down, and that level of adoption, right, is unprecedented. Like, I'm sure you know that we skipped a few layers with Aadhaar and Demon, right? Like we went ahead by 4 years in the fintech revolution just because that happened, and otherwise it would have taken so much more longer to hit the kind of scale that we have in these specific industries. A similar thing will be unleashed because of the dropping of prices and because of what you see now happening with Reliance and Jio is actually going to affect a lot of these things, and you will see that there will be so many more opportunities that will come up, on top of which extremely large companies will be built out of India, and consumption largely in India, which is where I'm going with this, in terms of saying that consumers have already evolved. So I'll give you an interesting stat to prove that, right? As a company and as something that we've been going through. When we launched B2C last year in November, we did it as an experiment. And we launched our smart padlock to begin with. It's actually a very basic product, fingerprint-based padlock that you can open. You can store 20 fingerprints, etc. Right? What is amazing is, till date, we've sold that product in more than 400 cities in the country. Mm-hmm. Right? Online, across all states, union territories, except Lakshadweep. And And I'm talking about people in villages that are buying these locks and using it on their sheds and whatnot, with a total population of maybe 5,000, 6,000, right? Like in the most remotest places, like 400 plus. When I say cities, I obviously mean towns and villages included. That was like a crazy eye-opener. And today, the minute we launched our door locks with post this Unlock 1.0, we've been seeing the same behavior. Most 3 out of 5 door locks that we sell online are bought by consumers in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. So everything said and done, I think the consumer will demand a certain quality of product. The consumer will demand a certain speed of delivery, etc., and today has access to information from everywhere around the world. So he knows and understands what quality means. So I think Indians will definitely step up to the challenge, and government will have to support. It's a chain. Once it's already started, and it will continue to evolve from here.
Yeah, only I don't have a crystal ball. I'm an eternal optimist, but I don't know. We have youngsters. We have jumped through a lot of things in telecom. We bypassed the pager and all the initial revolution, and we possibly sort of caught on to telecom right at the beginning of the 3G revolution.
Yeah.
And same thing with the fintech. We bypassed the banking revolution and jumped right into digital banking. But on the flip side, a lot of our youngsters, the younger ones who should be driving a lot of change, while a lot of them are hungry, a lot of them have discovered the pleasure side of life as well really, really quickly, right? So, and the unfortunate aspect of it is there is very little aspirational leadership, right? So there are, you look around wherever in the country, the role models that you can look at, you don't have too many of them. For me, a couple of weeks ago or maybe a month ago, I was listening to this ebook, the book on Tatas. And if you read up about the journey that J.N. Tata had to go through to establish Indian Institute of Science, it is really, really fascinating. There are very few Indian business patriarchs, there are lots of business families who can lay claim or even remotely claim to have come close to what J.N. Tata was there. Now, that doesn't make J.N. Tata great, but what it means is that we need thousands of J.N. Tatas if India has to transform. I think for me, I see that as a big gap in business and in industry and in politics, where you could have larger than life leaders who are showing that there is a new India that is possible. It is yet to happen, but we'll see.
So Krishna, I draw a very interesting parallel with regard to this, and I sort of attribute India where it is now to the early days of America. When I say early days, I mean early 1800s.
Right.
When Lincoln had just died, and then you had a few masters.
Post Civil War.
Yeah, post the Civil War. Like you had Vanderbilt, and then post his era, then the Rockefellers and the Carnegies, and then Ford, and the reason I draw a parallel is simply because India is, I believe, at that nascent stage. We are really in our early days right now. We are looking at this global opportunity that we had never looked at. Like India, as we can clearly say, we haven't built companies that have scaled outside our borders, right? Not enough of them. But now is when you will see them. Like when you see tomorrow that a startup from India has scaled and become really like Oyo, although irrespective of their business model and what many people think about it, is still a great story. Is still a young chap who's used VC money or not, but built something out there that Ivanka Trump is going to tweet about. Is great. I mean, I'm just saying that scale, that to be able to travel that journey is by itself amazing. But now, I'm not saying it was the most efficient, he used the most efficient way to get there, but it was only the beginning. Now you'll see more people learning from such journeys, building models that are far more efficient, far more profitable. SaaS is something that is scaling. You will see a lot of edtech rising, IoT also hopefully in that sort of on that level, right? But very early days is what I feel. It truly, the next decade and two belongs to India. Is as you said, I'm also an eternal optimist, but honestly, that's how I draw a parallel.
So I think SaaS might be that moment. You're absolutely right. IT services again became the oligarchy kind of a model where only 3 or 4 families or founders really became wealthy. Well, they spawned a lot of people. I got a chance to go visit the world as a result of that. You're right, SaaS could be a model, and in some sense you're right about the parallel. Though one of the things about the US is there is a bunch of states called the Rust Belt states. So these are Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, which used to be home to a lot of manufacturing, which is now out of China, right? The funny thing that you'll find is over there is every small town in those Rust Belt states, okay, has a $1 billion company.
Nice.
And if you read up their stories, three examples I can give you is two examples I can give you is Whirlpool. Okay, so Whirlpool is based out of a city called Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is home to the Michigan Business School. And the thing that stands out is when you go to these cities, there is hardly anything there. It is not a thriving ecosystem. It is very desolate, and all of these are heavy states where there's a lot of snow and the winters are harsh. But Whirlpool, which was born out of there, is a global corporation, and there is another corporation called Dover, which is a $9 billion corporation. And you could keep going on and on and on, and you'll keep finding examples like that. Kellogg's, which also came out of, I think, Michigan. So there are so many companies which were all small, very, very small in the early 1900s, but became multinationals. So SaaS could be, because manufacturing, we are already behind manufacturing. While we definitely need to grow in manufacturing, SaaS could be that model. Segments like IoT could be that model.
Correct. Software product companies, SaaS, IoT. I mean, IoT again, IoT software, IoT, but maybe a bit of IoT hardware. But truly, see, you'll have more inspiration when you have more Indians on the world stage.
That's correct.
Now, I think we're already at a point where more Indians are already on the world stage as CEOs or as managers running these companies started by Americans or Chinese or someone else. When you have more global companies out of India, that's when, you'll see a surge. That's when we hit it.
Right. So what's next for OpenApp?
I think, the way I look at it, IoT is, the journey has just begun. In fact, in November, we will be completing 5 years of officially starting OpenApp, although we spent 1 year in sort of deliberating and building the basic product. From here, as I've kept saying, and I will continue to say, that IoT is the future. We think that we've just really begun. In fact, we've taken these 5 years to establish ourselves as a credible player in a specific vertical, which is smart locks, with both businesses going strong, B2B and B2C. Now we are evolving into becoming a full stack IoT platform, which definitely has the potential to go global, right? We've already tied up with some of the largest names out there, onboarded them on our specific platform, soon to be launched. So the whole industry by itself is going to be, I think, 500 plus billion. I don't really know what it's going to be. 500 plus billion in the next 2 years. I'm talking about just by 2022, right? And the story about the total number of devices that I told you that I had looked up, and which was 5 years ago. Now, if you look at it from here, is going to cross 40 plus billion. I think, if I'm not wrong, that number is 47 billion by 26 or 27, right? So it's this journey has just begun. I think 5 years was prep. From here is truly where we think we will start looking at scale from a whole new dimension. Because till now we only were looking at growth. We were looking at adding a single zero, an extra zero to our every year, right? To what we've been doing. But the next journey is going to be about speed. We have our fundamentals right. We know exactly what we're doing. Our turnaround times are one of the fastest for this kind of companies globally. I think we will incorporate speed into our modus operandi, and we will look at changing some fundamental things around the Indian consumer's home very soon.
Very interesting. So Gotama, this has been an awesome conversation. We've We've discussed a wide range of topics, your initial start in journalism from an education perspective, your brush with food and beverage, and then eventually, in some sense, maybe an accidental jump into IoT. But if I have to see a common thread, I see that it is your entrepreneurial nature and spirit that has kind of sustained and helped you thrive. And along the way, I think you uncovered a few lessons as well, right? So you need to be there. I remember, I'm not sure, I don't know if it was Barry Diller who runs this multi-billion-dollar company called Interactive Corp. Barry Diller used to be the chairman of Paramount, Viacom, which owns Paramount at one point in time. And his line was, it is in the sixth year that you truly see enormous amount of scale. So, and then you hear 6 months, Times of India, Economic Times, most of our media makes it look like you only started yesterday. Like Sam Walton says, when somebody quizzed him about overnight success, he said, yeah, it was an overnight success, 20 years in the making. But I think looks like you've established a fantastic platform, a fantastic foundation, and have the fundamentals right. I think your heart is right, your mind is right. We know you'll scale greater heights. Maharajas of scale will be there to talk to you again to see what that vantage point looks like and also cheer you on to your next summit.
Thank you very much, Krishna. And that thing about 6 years, very encouraging. I think he might have drawn parallels and reference from the Chinese bamboo. That's also what is said about the Chinese bamboo.
Right.
They say if you sit there and look at it closely, you can see it grow. That's how quickly it grows in the 6th year. So again, fingers crossed. Hope you are right about that reference. And irrespective, we're playing the long game. We're very, very clear about that. I didn't start this because it was fancy then. I started it because I truly thought that this was a long-term opportunity and the need was very inherent for anybody out there with regard to locks and access. And now that we've established ourselves as a market leader in our country, we are now expanding that business and we are now going broader into the larger segment of IoT itself. And this will be a very, very interesting journey. We are here for the long run. It will be nice to see this play out. If nothing, this will be really, really fun.
Amazing. Before we sign off, any words of wisdom for potential entrepreneurs and existing entrepreneurs that are listening to you on Maharajas of Scale?
I don't think I am at a level where I can advise somebody, but look, I think the way I look at this is very simple, right? I know that I am not special. And what I mean by that is it could be in terms of either what we've achieved, my background, etc., etc., etc. But of all the innumerable examples that I've either read about or have seen in front of my eyes and aspire to be, there's one characteristic that truly, truly, truly attributes to success. If there's one word that is equal to success, is perseverance, right? Like if you have the bloody balls, if I can say so, to go out there, the courage to face anything out there and do whatever it takes, success cannot really elude you. It's only a matter of time, and you just keep going at it, not more.
Yeah, you bend the universe to your will.
Yeah, so that's it. As I said, there's nothing more that I can say because every journey is truly, truly unique. I just feel that live it out to the fullest, do whatever it takes, bloody keep pushing.
Keep at it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. With that note, thanks for being on the show and have a wonderful day.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
We hope you enjoyed this story. If this story made a difference to you, tell us by leaving a comment on the website or our social media channels. Help us spread the love by subscribing, liking, and sharing our show. We welcome speaker suggestions and collaboration. Write to me at tanya@maharajasofscale.com.